Hello and welcome to Worthy Woman Healing. I am Lisa Czak, your host, healing women's minds, bodies, and souls one trigger at a time. Don't forget to like, subscribe. I'm loving all the interaction. So if you have questions, put them in comments. If you have questions for my guest, put them in comments. I love hearing from you. On today's episode, we have Coach Tara Carmichael, who happens to be one of my coaches. Yes, one of my coaches, because it takes a village to keep me on my healing journey. So let's go ahead and welcome her right here, right now. Hello, yes. Coach Tara. This is my coach, one of my coaches, I say, because it takes a village to keep me, just centered and balanced.
Keep you together, keep you balanced. All the parts working together, coming together, working really good.
It's so weird. I have to tell you, just seeing you, I feel like I should be doing a burpee, or I feel like my butt should be lower in a squat, or I should be going heavy, or...
Oh my goodness. This is so awesome.
Okay, so we were talking one day, as we do, right?
Uh-huh.
And we're just talking about healing and trauma. And, I work with a lot of women who are in abusive situations, were in abusive situations, were exploited in some way.
Right.
And you started sharing your story. And I always say that, like, the testimony is not really, it's the story, but it's really how you overcame it. So would you mind just share your brief, your experience that lasted this long? Just give us like a brief overview of this relationship that you were in, like how it started. Like, I like to focus on, because I really want people to learn, right? I want women watching this to learn, like, in the beginning, what was he like, right? And how soon did he change into the relationship, and the progression of it, like the cycle, and then how you kind of started seeing that for what it is, right? The abuse that was happening, and how you actually got out of it. Does that make sense? Because there's always like this, every time I have somebody share their story, and it's like that beginning part too, right? I feel like it all starts off the same. Oh, they were great,
Yeah. So first of all, I will say that I was very young.
How young?
I was still in high school when I met him. And at the time it started off as us just being friends, because there was a bit of an age gap between the two of us. I think it was maybe about 5 years, maybe 5.5 years gap. And so when I first met him, I was in, I think I was in the 11th grade when I first met him. And then he had a brother. I was a cheerleader at my school, at my high school. He had a younger brother who went to another school who played football. And so we would always kind of just run into each other at certain games. And it became like he knew a bunch of people. We had some mutual associates or friends that we knew. And so in the beginning, it was just like a casual, like, hey, what's up? How you doing? Type thing. And then slowly, as time went by, I started working in the mall. I had one of my first jobs where I was working in a clothing store in the mall. And I remember him coming in there, and he was like, oh, hey, how you doing? You work here, da, 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 da. And there was a little bit more flirting. By this time, I was a 12th grader. So there was a little bit more flirting going on. He told me that he was there looking to purchase a Christmas outfit, because it was coming up to the holidays, a Christmas outfit for a young lady that he was either seeing or dating at the time, and that I assisted him to do that. After that spring, we ran back into each other, and we finally end up exchanging like phone numbers and all of that. From that point, from the time I met him at the store, I think we exchanged numbers then. And then we kind of just kept in contact and like talking over the phone, nothing too serious, very laid back, very casual. And as the springtime approached, we started talking about relationships. And I think at the time it was somebody that he was seeing, somebody that I was kind of seeing type deal. And then it started to progress to once I finally turned 18, which was in October of my last school year. We decided that, okay, well, now you're 18, we should try to date. So we started dating. And then things were fine. I mean, we had fun. We went out. He met my mom at the time and met my sister, immediate family. Him and his friends and me and my cousins, we would go out together, and it was all about fun. It was just really, really fun. After I graduated high school, over the summer, there was a living situation, and I was living at home with my mom, and I was going off to school. So it was a decision of me staying home and going to University of Memphis, or I was wanting to leave to go to Clark Atlanta. And because my mom was a single parent, I made a much financial reasonable decision, and I stayed home. By that time, we had kind of got serious. And then I ended up moving in with him. And my mom was completely fine with it. By this time she had knew him. We had met each other's families and everything. So we ended up getting an apartment together. This is my freshman year of college at University of Memphis. And it was certain things like after I moved in that was leading up to the point where I was like, okay, something's not quite right.
What was the first time you went,
So the first time that I went, was I came across some pictures. I don't know if they were old pictures, but I came across pictures of him and random girls. Like it wasn't like, oh, this is a picture of his ex-girlfriend, but it was just pictures of him with random women. And so then I asked him about it, and he was like, oh, well, yeah, those are all friends, and this right here, da, 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 and this is my brother's girlfriend's sister, and blah, 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 blah. So that was one thing. The other thing was him not being honest about like where he was going or who he was with, coming home late, not coming home until morning. And then all of a sudden I was told that he had this overnight job that he was working for FedEx. During the day, he actually was a sheriff. He started off in the police precinct. And so he had a full-time day job. And so then it was kind of wishy-washy. But me still being young and just like, hey, I'm on my own. I have this boyfriend and da 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 da. And, I'm in college. I can do what I want to do. And that's the mentality that I had, And so it was little things where we started kind of getting into arguments about his location or him saying that he was going to do this or he was going to do that. And especially about him just coming home late. So then after that, we lived together in the apartment for about almost 2 years. And then the relationship where I thought was still getting serious, all of the signs, I guess, at that point, it was just like, okay, well, I can deal with this. Not that awful. The first
you convince yourself. Yeah.
Right. It's not that awful because I didn't see any signs at that moment that it would be awful. awful, you know?
Mhm.
And so, and I was like, okay, yeah, he's not honest about this and blah, 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 whatever, whatever. And then the ex-girlfriend came back into the picture. And it was not him necessarily trying to them like getting back together or messing around or whatever, whatever. But it was just like she was just so angry and she would drive by the apartment. And so I had an issue with her knowing where we lived. And she would drive the apartment and then she would call him and then she would be hollering out the window. And it was just like, so a whole bunch of like bad energy and different stuff that was going on. So after that, he ended up proposing to me. And at the time I accepted it. I was excited. We were engaged to get married. And then and then there was a home that was purchased. And it was part of my engagement gift from him. So he had a whole home that was built, brand new home, and we ended up moving in to our brand new home. It was at that moment where I that it was not as I imagined it to be or had put in my head for it to be. When we moved, things evidently were stressful and, and then I was during this time, I was still going to school and I was working at Old Navy. I was a supervisor. And I had random women that was calling my job, like asking to speak to me. They knew me by name. They knew where I worked. And they were asking to speak to me. And when I would get to the phone, they would tell me like, hey, yeah, you don't know me, but I know your fiance, da, da, da. And this was right leading up to the time of us getting married. And she would say, well, we were together the other night and, he told you this and told you that, but this is what really was, we've been seeing each other. So every time I would ask him about it, he would, of course, lie about it and say, oh, those are just girls from my past and they just know who you are. They're just jealous because they want to be with me and they want to be my wife. And, and we never got to that point. So again, me being naive, I'm like, well, yeah, that's true. That's true. That makes sense. Whatever. They're probably just jealous. And so it got to the point where we end up getting married. During this time, also, my mom ended up getting very, very sick. We found out that my mom had stage 4 pancreatic cancer right in the beginning of us getting married. So we got married in March of 2003. And my mom had started getting sick over that summer, like that spring leading to the summer part. We found out that she had pancreatic cancer. And it was some issues that she had been dealing with for a long time. And we just found out late. And so during the first year of my marriage, after we got married, we had a small wedding and because I was in school, I was working, he was working, and I just felt like if we were going to do this, let's just do this. I don't want anything big and extravagant. Let's just do it with our families and our close friends and keep it small, because right now we don't have a whole lot of money and things like that. So we end up getting married. After we got married, leading up to this time, we had argued, we had fought several times. It was times where I went through this big, massive depression where I would lock myself in the guest room for like days at a time, especially like over the weekend where I would not come out, I would not eat. I had this obsession with cleaning as a way to kind of like soothe myself. So I remember my sister and my cousin, I'm always coming over, or they would call me like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm just cleaning. And they're like, you're always cleaning. Nothing's never wrong with your home. And so I had this obsession with cleaning. I would have these breakdowns. I had started panic attacks. It
Mhm.
was just all of this. All right. And so, but yeah, I was always cleaning because I felt like that was a way for me to,
Mhm.
exert myself and get out all of this energy. And so I cleaned and I would lock myself in the room during the weekends. And I was just so depressed. I was so depressed. And then finding out about my mom being sick later on at the end of the spring, beginning of the summer. And it was just a lot to take on. So, long story short, we was married. There was a lot of fighting. A lot of we were. It was like when we were by ourselves, we didn't like each other. We were that couple that had to be around other people and be around friends
Mhm.
in order for us to like really have a good time. Other people had to be involved in it. And when we would do things kind of one-on-one, it would just, sometimes it would be great. And then sometimes it would just be like, and so it kind of got to the point where it felt like I was putting on or I was living this double life because at home things weren't, but everybody around us and all of our friends and my cousins and families and everybody just thought we had it like so together. Oh, you all are such a
Mhm.
cute couple. You're such the perfect this. And oh my goodness, relationship goals and da 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 da. And I just learned how to put on and mask my depression,
Mhm.
mask my hurt, mask what it was that I was feeling. Um, and then just always trying to have that stand up smile and, yeah, life is wonderful type thing. And I knew that, but, I'm like, fake it until you make it. Nobody has to know
Mhm.
exactly what's going on. And being so young with him and I both being young, I can't blame 100% on him because there were things that I did. I know now looking back over it after I've grown is that, I had my issues just as much as he had his. And so after we end up having to move, from our house. There was during this time of year where there was some stuff going on with the loans where they had did this influx of people buying these new houses and on these non-fixed loans and things like that.
Oh,
And so
yeah.
our mortgage was like going
Mhm.
haywire. And so we end up having to sell our home and we end up moving into a townhome. And things were still not good. And I was by this time, I had stopped. So let me back up a little bit. So after being married for a year, my mom ended up, our anniversary was March 21st of 2004, which was 1 year of us being married. My mom ended up passing literally a week after my 1 year anniversary. And that just kind of took me downhill. I had issues with not only just going out and partying all the time, but drinking all the time,
Mhm.
anything that can numb what it was that I was feeling or what I was going through. And it was times where I literally felt like I just wanted to break wow, you know. But because I was married, and I know this seems kind of weird, but because I was married at the time, I felt like, I'm married. There's still a certain part of me that has to, still hold myself together because I am married. And, even though my marriage is crappy and, we fight all the time and he's very abusive, he's verbally abusive to me, it's better to be in this relationship with somebody than be by myself during this time in my life.
Mhm.
And so I chose to just suck it up and deal with it. And so me and my friends, I'm still in my early 20s at this time, still very young. And we partied and we went out of town. And, I did whatever it was that I could possibly think of to do to keep myself feeling good, even though I was not
Mhm.
doing good. And so
Yeah.
after that, we end up being married for 7 years. And through all that time, it was the 5th year of being married that I realized that I wanted more and I wanted change for myself. I ended up dropping out of college after my mom passed because I felt like a zombie. I was showing up to class, but I was not putting any effort in my class. And I said, I'm wasting my time. I'm wasting my money. I'm wasting the professor's time. I just need to take some break because I couldn't concentrate at all. And so I ended up dropping out of school after my almost 3rd year of college. And my last year, my grades were awful, horrendous. I had withdrawn for majority of my classes. And then the ones that I was still enrolled in, I was barely passing. And so I was working at the bank full time. And I just remembered this is not the way I want to live the rest of my life. It was like something just kind of snapped and woke up in me. Mm-hmm. And I was like, being married is good, but what's the point in being married if I'm not happy? And I would see other couples and meet people and meet other couples. I was like, man, my marriage is not like that. I'm completely, totally missing out. And then he was still cheating. I had received another phone call from a lady who could literally tell me where everything was on the inside of my house because she had been there, had been in my bedroom, had been in my bed. And of course, as usual, he denied it. And so in my mind, I started thinking like, okay, I've got to start making some changes because this right here is not going to last. I knew after 5 years, my 5th year, I knew that I was going to be leaving. I didn't know when, I didn't know how long, but I knew I was going to be leaving. And so at that point, I started stashing money. I had opened up me another savings account where I was just putting money. One thing I can say about my ex-husband is money to him, he would do something or we would fight. And he would go and buy me something. Or either he would give me cash money, like $300, $400 and say, hey, just go to the mall or go out with your friends and enjoy yourself. He was that type of person. So when we would fight or he would do something, or I would receive a phone call from a lady who was able to tell me where everything is in my home and tell me what my bed sheets look like. He would try to make up by doing something for me or buying me something or giving me something.
The love, it sounds like love, like that was the cycle of abuse for him.
Right. And so all the money and things that he gave me, when he gave me cash money, instead of me going to the mall and go shopping, I would put it in my savings account. So whenever he would give me money instead of me doing all, because shopping was my thing back then. My was ridiculous. And the things that I had stuff in my closet for years that tags on it. And I'm like, I'm not even wearing stuff. It's impossible for me to wear all of this. And I'm shop therapy was my thing. I would go out, I would buy my friends things. We would, we would just splurge money.
You are only as sick as your secrets. It is time to stop suffering in silence and join other women who are also on a healing journey, who are being raw, real, vulnerable, and honest with what they are going through in their life, what they have been through in their life. And wherever two or more are gathered, we know God is with us. It says it right there in the Bible. So there is power to group healing. Miracles happen in there. You have one woman sharing, opening up her heart. Suddenly everyone else in the group is saying, yeah, I've experienced that. I'm not the only one. There's such power in knowing that you are not alone in your suffering. You are not alone in your healing. And we meet twice a month. And in between those times, a lot happens, right? And it's important that you have time in between the sessions to practice the healing technique that I teach you, so you can come back into the group and celebrate with the other women. Hey, I actually remembered to do the healing technique in that moment. That trigger didn't derail me anymore. But it's practice. I'm also a personal trainer, right? You don't just get a 6-pack abs by doing one sit-up. You have to keep doing it over and over again. You don't run a marathon. You don't go out and run 13.1 miles for a half marathon the first time, right? You practice running a little bit every day. And that is what we do in Worthy Woman Healing Group. Join today and tell yourself, I'm going to give this a 3-month commitment minimum, because I know I need time to practice outside of these sessions, and come in and get guidance from the other women on how to actually heal all of these wounds, heal my mind, body, and soul, one trigger at a time. You are worth it. I wanted to ask you, because you were young, how old were you?
So I got married when I was 20 years old. When I was 21, we made a year of being married. My mom had passed. And all of that happened within the year of us getting married in March of 20.
So how did
2023 of 2003.
Let me ask you this. How did you know? Because you're young, right? Were you seeing a counselor, or how did you know to open up your own account, start stashing money away?
Well, I knew that from when I was young. My mom used to always call me Lady. Lady was my nickname because she said I always had an old soul. And so I have an older sister who's 10 years older than I am. And her and I, we are like night and day. So my mom used to always joke about, she said, I could send you and your sister to school, and both of you all are just, your hair is done and your stockings are done and you have on a nice dress. And she said, and you're the only daughter that comes home still looking like the way I sent her. And she used to joke about it. And my sister was kind of tomboyish. And so she would come back to have these big old ruins in her stockings. Her hair is all messed up. I mean, literally, I was so reserved and, and just liked, if mom put me this away, I wanted to stay this away. and my mom used to always say I had an old soul as growing up. Believe it or not, my mom was the oldest of 6 kids. Wow. My grandmother had her when she was 15 years old. My grandfather and my grandmother married when my grandmother was 14. And a year later, my mom was born. So it was like my mom and my grandmother kind of grew up together. And with her being the oldest of 6 kids, my mom there was a lot of stuff that she did not know. I think I was sometime in high school where I just kind of started taking over things for my mom and helping her out. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if it was something that I learned in school or, whatever, but it was just like, okay, mom, you need a checking account. Why don't you have a checking account? I would balance her checkbook back in the day. Oh my gosh, balance checkbooks. That's so long ago.
Wow. You see, like, I just feel like, wow, God set you up, right? Like right. He knew you were, like, you remembered these things. Like this is part of who you were.
Stuff. It was just like stuff would come into my head. Even most of the time, the things would pop into my head and I'd be like, how do I know that? Where did that come from? And so I helped my mom establish her first credit card. Like, she did not have credit. I helped her start her credit. I helped her with her checking account. It was just like my mom and I just did a lot of stuff for her. So those things that I did to assist her just kind of traveled on. I my mom started me a savings account from when I was in elementary school. So I used to go to the bank with her every other Friday when she would get paid. And I would watch her cash her check, and then she would give me like $5 and say, hey, go to the next window and put this into your savings account. So it was like different things that I had known to do. And then I found out about this checking account. I'm like, oh, I can have a checking account where I can have checks and write checks like I'm in, important and sign my signature and pay for things. Let me get one of those. So, and so I had always had one for a long time. And so just thinking about opening up another one. And then also I ended up working in the bank too. So when I was
that's right.
Part of my marriage, majority of the ending of my marriage, I was working in the bank. I was a bank supervisor as a teller. And so working in the business and just learning about all of the savings and checking accounts and things like that, I'm like, hey, I can have other checking accounts, not only at this bank, but other banks, and put away money for myself. And so that's what I did.
Was he ever controlling with your money that you made? Did he ever catch on?
It was never controlling with money. It was controlling with what I did. Like, and it, I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain because it wasn't, oh no, you can't go here or you can't. I had a whole lot of freedom, but I was controlled mentally, if that makes sense. Like it wasn't the fact of him saying that I couldn't go somewhere. Like I spent more time with my friends and doing what I wanted to do than I did with him. But that also allowed him to do what he wanted to do with whomever he wanted to do it with as well.
Right.
And so
it was manipulation.
Like, and
go out with your friends so I can go cheat on you.
So
with
I
all
can
these
have my
women.
freedom and do this too, And it wasn't controlling about what I wore. Like I had the free range to wear what I wanted to wear and dress how I wanted to dress. And it wasn't until years later when my friends later told me, they were like, you and your ex-husband had such a great relationship. For a minute, we thought you all were swingers. And I was like, what? And they were like, yeah, because, he would be just, so flamboyant and this right here and all of the friends. And y'all always did things with other friends and go out of town and And I was like, no, that wasn't the case. I said, however, he did cheat. and it got to the point where I knew he was cheating. And I used to tell myself, like, we have an open relationship as far as when he would cheat, I would know who he was cheating with, the girl's name, where she lived. I knew all of this information. So if somebody, and that's how I presented it to him, because we constantly argued and I just got so tired of arguing about him stepping out on me that I was like, if you're going to do this, at least have enough respect for me to tell me that you're doing it and let me decide to make the choice for myself.
Yeah.
Not, I'm okay with it or what I want to say.
Well, you said something, you said a couple of things that I want to touch on. And there was a couple of times that you said, like, we were arguing. And just hearing your story, it sounds like what was happening is you were holding him accountable and he didn't like it.
Oh, right.
And that's when he would dole out the abuse, right?
Right.
So it goes way beyond like an argument. Like this is abuse. This is you, because abusers don't like that. When you hold them accountable, they don't like that. Right? Yeah. So I just think it's interesting.
And that is absolutely true.
Yeah, just that.
That's absolutely true. How you say that, because it would be the times where when we would get to arguing is when it would then turn abusive. Oh, well, just shut up, or I would get slapped. Or it was times where I remember one time his friend came over and he was we were supposed to have plans to do something. And his friend came over and he was like, oh yeah, I'm about to go. And I'm like, go. And he's like, yeah, I'm about to go. We got to do this. And I was like, but we had plans. That turned into a whole argument, which then turned into me being drugged in front of his friend across our living room floor and being choked out. And his friend just stood there the whole time and watched. So and then it got to the point where we didn't fight because I guess I had gotten to the point where it's like, you know what? I know what I'm dealing with, whatever, whatever, whatever. And we had this conversation where I told him, like, at least you can tell me and let me make the decision and see how I feel about it. So we started having conversations. And I think that's the most that we had ever talked about what was going on, because he started to tell me these different women or woman at the time that he was dealing with. So I knew all of this information. And to me, that felt empowering to a certain degree, because I'm like, instead of people coming up to me and saying, "Oh, girl, I saw your husband and he was such and such with this lady, da da da," and I to me, it felt empowering to be like, "Oh, I know about that." So it got to the point where my friends thought that we were swingers, because they thought that because I was so open about it and he was so open about what he was doing, that we both were doing it. But no, it was just to the fact that I just was like, you know, he's a cheater. This is something that he's going to do. And if I'm going to stay in this marriage, this is one thing that I'm going to have to deal with. And if we stop arguing about it, that starts us from fighting about it, and we'll stop the abuse and things like that. And I just became okay with it. I became numb to it, where then, of course, where I didn't want to spend time with him, and I was having the time of my life with my friends or my girlfriends, and we were traveling and we were going out of town and we were doing this, where I didn't think about that. But deep down inside, there was still a hole, because I'm like, when I would talk to other people, I would meet other people about relationships, it wasn't nothing good that I felt like I could share about my marriage, because I really wasn't happy. I was putting up with so much stuff. And so, just like I said earlier, after 5 years, I was like, you know, something's got to change. So I started making plans and making small changes about changing my life that did not include, I was like, in order for me to get better and for me to get healthy, I've got to start focusing on me. And so I had got tired of working at the bank. And I just remember praying. I was like, Lord, I was like, something's got to change. Just show me what it is that I need to do. And that night I went home. I think I remember telling you this. I went home, I went to bed, and I had a dream about my mom, and she was furious. And so a little story behind the dream part of it is, after my mom passed, I remember praying and talking to God. And I said, Lord, I said, don't take my mom completely away from me. If we could have some type of way to communicate, where I can communicate with her. And when I say that my mom was my best friend, like, I have an older sister, but I would go to my mom and tell my mom things before I would go to my sister. That's just how close we were. To the point that when I was in high school and when I was in middle school, my friends was like, "You told your mom what? You had that conversation with your," and I'm like, "Yeah, you don't talk to your mom like that." And they were like, I would never tell my mom that. Like, my mom knew when I started having sex. It was just conversations that we had. I felt my mom was really my best friend, and she did not judge me. She did not make me feel like I was wrong, because she was like, if you're going to learn about this stuff, I would rather you come to me and us have a conversation and me know what you're doing so I can help you to take care of yourself in the process. And so she was my best friend. And so I prayed to God. And after my mom passed, I started having these wonderful, glorious dreams of me and my mom doing all kinds of stuff. I mean, we would travel the world. We would go to Disney World. We would ride the roller coasters, things that I know my mom would never do in real life, by the way. But
your heavenly mom, your heavenly angel mom did everything.
Heavenly mom did everything. She was like, let's go. I'm on for it. We would go to the movies. We would go shopping, things that I felt like we never did or even did enough of when she was alive. And we did all of these fantastic things together. And so as the years, because at this point, I'm like at 5 years, my mom has been deceased. And over the years, the dreams kind of slowed down. And then I noticed that I would only pretty much dream about her is when I would find myself in a bind, or if I was having a dilemma about something. And she would come to me and like help me figure out which would be like the same conversations that we would have if she was still alive. And I'd be like, Mom, I'm dealing with this. What do you think about this? And, and she just always knew things to say. So I started having these type of dreams about my mom, and where we would have these conversations. And so this particular night I went home, did everything I normally do, went to sleep, and I had a dream, and my mom was furious, and she was yelling and scolding at me. And she was like, you know exactly what you're supposed to be doing. You are procrastinating right now. This is not the way you want to continue to live your life. And she was just like, saying everything that I needed to hear. And she said, you've been talking about going back to school. What are you waiting for? You told me you were going to get a degree and da-da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And just listening and bawling all at the same time in my sleep. And so at the end of the dream, I remember her saying, she said, just know that I'm here with you and I believe in you, no matter what you do, no matter what you decide, no matter what happened. And I remember waking up, like literally laying on my back and just sitting up in the bed. And it's like, oh my gosh, I got to get back in school. What in the world? It's like everything was just like, okay, this has got to happen. This got to happen. This happen. So that day I went to work, and while in between working with customers and things, I'm filling out my application to go to school on the computer.
I love
it. End up getting accepted. So 2 weeks went by. I spent those 2 weeks getting everything that I needed to get into school. I end up getting into school a week later, right in time for summer school. The week after I was accepted to summer school, I end up quitting my job at the bank, and I became a full-time student. At this time, my ex-husband and I had a conversation, and he agreed. And I said, look, I want to go back to school. And I was like, and, I want to finish my degree because I want to do this and da, 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 da. And so he was like, okay, that's fine. Go to school and, I'll make sure everything else is taken care of. So that's what I did. I went to school. But as soon as I got enrolled in school and started doing great, his abusiveness and abusiveness starts to come back. Because I was doing so wonderful. I was on the dean's list every semester. I was making straight A's. It's just like everything I had went into school because I knew that this was something that I needed to do. And the more I succeeded in school, the more it seemed like I discussed him. Mm-hmm. And I remember him always saying, like, you just think you're smart now because you're in school, you're going to college with all those college people. And, you think you're this and you think you that. And I just kept on telling myself, I said, you know what? This is my focus. I said, if I have to stay here until I graduate and wait till I get a job to leave, I said, that's what I'm doing. But I can't do it until I finish my education. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I was all about. Well, during the end of the summer, my ex-husband had an accident. Him and one of his police officer friends, they were drinking and driving and had an accident on the highway. Totaled a truck that I had co-signed for him for. And so it was like God had started slowly releasing me from things because I kept on saying, I said, man, I can't leave. This truck is in my name. He's going to screw up my credit. Few months later, he ended up having an accident, totaled the truck. It was paid off for Gap. And God said, okay, you're released from that. Now what? So it was just like little things started happening. And I remember he went out of town and we had such a stupid argument over the cable bill or something. My cousin was there who was staying there for this week while he was out of town with his friends. And he came back home and we ended up having this big old blow up. Again, I was drugged through the house, slammed up against the wall, slammed on the floor, punched, kicked, everything. And I called 911. And because of where we lived right outside the city limit. The sheriff,
and he's still a sheriff, right? He's still a sheriff at this point.
He's still a sheriff at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was at that moment where I knew that I needed to leave. And the sheriff officer came to the house, literally sat on my couch in my living room and joked around and laughed and hee-heed and ha-ha'd with my ex-husband after me calling them for domestic violence abuse. And at that moment, just seeing it, it's like something snapped. And I kept saying to myself, I got to get out because I'm going to kill him or he's going to kill me. I was like, at this point, I don't have any help. The people that I've called to that's supposed to protect me, they sat here and talked about work stuff and laughed and, and the only thing they did was make him leave. And then I was told a lie that somebody was going to call me to follow up and never really called. To find out that the report was not even completed like it was supposed to. And at that point, I was just like, I've got to leave. And I was like, okay, Lord, this door open. So I remember talking to one of my really good friends, my close friends, and I'm like, this is what's going on. And she was one of the very few people who knew exactly what I had been dealing with over the years. And I said, this is what's going on. I was like, and it's to the point where I feel like I'm going to kill him or either he's going to kill me, but I'm not going down without a fight. And I remember telling her that. And she said, well, that's bad. She said, so you're going to do it. And I said, I just need somewhere to go. I need somewhere to live because I just want to leave him just right now. And so she was living with her father at the time while she was transitioning, working on moving out. And so she had a conversation with her dad. He had an extra room and it just all of a sudden worked out. And he was like, yeah, she can come here and live with us. So I packed up all of the stuff that I wanted to take with me. My cousin helped me during the week right after this major accident where the sheriffs came to my house and they sat on the couch and talked to my ex-husband. They gave him a week to stay gone from the house. During that week, my cousin came back over and she helped me pack up all of my things. And that weekend where he returned, I just told him all at one time. While the truck was there, everything, like we had a U-Haul truck, like I had planned everything. So he ended up coming back to the house that Saturday morning. And I said, oh, by the way, I was like, my cousin is pulling up with a U-Haul truck. I was like, I'm leaving today. And he looked and he said, you're leaving? I said, yeah. He said, well, where are you going? Start asking all this question. I was like, I'm not telling you this. I was like, but I'm leaving. I said, because at this point, I said, I fear for my safety. And I said, and I fear for yours as well. And he looked at me and his eyes got big and he said, but we need to talk about this. And what is it? What I'm sorry. It went into all of this. And I said, at this point, it doesn't matter. So I end up moving out all of my things. I end up putting the majority of my stuff in storage. I end up moving in with my friend's father, who ended up being my godfather, who becoming my godfather later on. And I was still in school. I said, Lord, no matter what happened, I am not going to let this affect my schooling. So
and you didn't.
I stayed in school the whole time. One of my other friends ended up giving me an attorney's information that his sister had used. And he said, you know what? This attorney, my sister had nothing but great things to say about this attorney, because not only did I want to leave, but I wanted my freedom and I wanted to be divorced. I wanted no dealings with this man anymore. And so I just said, I just want a divorce. I'm not going back. It's no point of us staying married. I just want my freedom to do what I want to do and live my life how I want to live it. So he ended up giving me this number. I called the attorney and it was just like a match made. I went to this attorney and I told him what I was going through, what was happening. At this time, when I left, the accounts that we did have joint together, my ex-husband removed all the money out of the account. And which was fine because I had already planned for that. And I kind of figured, I was like, I know he's going to do that because I know how he is with his money. And so as soon as I filed for divorce, my attorney said, well, what is it that you want out of divorce? And I said, well, I don't want anything. I don't want
Wow.
anything. He said, you don't want anything from your house? I said, no. I said, everything that I took is what I wanted. I said, every other thing in that house just reminds me of all of the pain, the loneliness, the hurt that I've experienced,
Mm-hmm.
because during this time leading up to this, after the 5 years, those next 2 years of my life was like we were like roommates. I had
Mm-hmm.
completely removed myself from the master bedroom, and I was staying and living and sleeping in the guest bedroom. So we were living more like apartment roommate or roommates than we were as husband and wife.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't talking. And so that's why this big blow up that happened was just like, okay, this is it. I'm not happy with the way
Mm-hmm.
I've been living anyway for the past couple of years. And so, and if we're going to go back to being abusive and me getting dragged through the house, then I don't want any dealings of it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so I end up filing for divorce. They served him at work in front of,
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming, for all of his buddies or whoever, I don't care. And I remember receiving a phone call from him, and he cursed me out. He called me everything but the child of God. And I just
Mm-hmm.
held the phone and I listened. And I told him, I said, okay. I said, but from this point on, if you have anything else that you would like to say to me, I said, you need to call my attorney. And I hung up
Good
the
for
phone.
you.
And
And
that was the
how
last
did you pay for the
that I
attorney?
spoke to. So I paid for the attorney with money that I had saved up. At this time, I was still working. I had started working at Sam's Club, and I was working in marketing, and I was cashier supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
So this time, so I was still working. I was finishing school. I had moved in with my godfather, and so I was making money. And at this point, Lisa, I didn't care how much money it was going to be. If I had to take out a loan to get divorced, I was going to do. It was just that point where whatever
Right.
I got to do, I'm going to do it to just get divorced. And I remember my attorney, he just could not believe that I didn't want anything. He said, well, he has a pension. Do you want half of that? I said, by the time he get his pension, I would have been moved on, living my best life. That's what I told him. I said, so I don't want any type of connection
Mm-hmm.
that's going to require me
Oh.
to have to see years down the line
Mm-hmm.
talking about money. I was like, I don't want anything from him. And he said, well, is there anything that you want? And I remember telling him, I said, the only thing that I want is I want my maiden name back. I want the name that my mom named me,
I have
because
chills right now.
I had changed my name.
Mm-hmm.
I dropped my middle name, which now I
Wow.
feel like was the most dumbest thing ever because of the story behind my middle name. And my last name became my middle name, and I added his name and his last name. And so I just told him, I said, I just want the name my mom named me. And
Wow.
he said, okay, well, we can do it. He said, no children. You don't want anything. He said, this should be very easy. I said, yes. I said, I want it to be very quick and easy. I said, because I'm in school full time. I said, I'm also working. I said, I just have a lot. I just want this to be done with. 8 months later, we end up having a mediation, because my attorney was thinking of me financially. And he said, this right here would be the cheapest way to do it. And he said, 100, your ex-husband pay 100. He said, and then you have a mediation with a judge, and she can write up all of your paperwork right then, and you don't even have to go to court. He said, I'll take care of the rest from there. So, of course, my ex-husband was an hour late for the mediation. We waited over an hour for him to get there, and we did it, signed the paper. We were divorced. I remember before I could get to the car good, I was in tears. I was bawling. I called my sister when I got in the car, and she said, oh my goodness, is everything okay? I said, it's wonderful.
Like a relief, right? Like it's finally,
Yes. I mean,
your whole
I was like,
story is like, it just shows the progression too, right?
Right.
Abuse gets worse over time. It doesn't get
Oh, yeah.
better.
It doesn't get better.
You
No.
start off as physical, right?
Yeah.
But like the progression of it, it just like it fits that progression. Like
Right.
and people and like women, justify it or
Hmm.
say, well, at least it's not this, at least it's not that. And like everybody's like rock bottom is different, right? But
Right.
your breaking point. But what I love about
Hmm.
your story too is like once you reach it, you'll do anything. Like you want it
Right.
as much as you want to breathe, right? Like you
Yeah.
said, you would have taken out a loan, would have done
Absolutely.
and yeah, it's like somebody like you just wanted air again,
Hmm.
right?
I remember somebody saying, when you're done, you're done. And when you
Mhm.
know you're done, you're done. And that's how it was for me. It was like, because, and I think that that's what people have a hard time understanding about people who are in abusive relationships, because sometimes it's not always the woman who's getting abused. Sometimes it could be the man that's getting abused. But they always say, oh no, that couldn't dare happen to me. I would never let nobody da da
I
da da da
hate
da.
that.
And
Why didn't she just
but
leave? Why didn't she just
right,
I'm
right,
like,
right,
I'm like,
right,
bitch, you haven't been in this
right.
situation. Now shut up
That,
until you've been in it.
and it's not that easy. And for some
No.
people, it may be, but you have to look at all the other factors that's being played in the person's life. And I look
Mhm.
at mine and I said, you know what? I said, if my mom was still alive, I would have left because I knew I would have had somewhere to go. But I did
Mhm.
not. I was in a place in my life where I literally felt like I had nobody because I had lost my best friend. And I
Yeah.
was still over the years trying to mentally think about and see, like, how am I going to live my life without my mom?
Mhm.
And it took me about 5 years to start
Mhm.
working my way through that, because you never know how long grief is going to last for a person and what it's going to take for them to come out of it. Because I was dealing with grief, I was depressed, I was,
Well,
suicidal
you
at
also
some
had
point.
grief about your marriage, right? Because
Right,
that's not the
absolutely.
marriage you thought you were. And while
Right.
you were in it, did you ever see it as abuse? Because most people women like don't see it as abuse. Like it's not even entering until they're being punched and dragged and it gets physical. A
Hmm.
lot of women do not even recognize it as abuse because they're like, well,
Hmm.
he doesn't hit me. If he doesn't hit me,
Hmm.
it's not, or he doesn't call names, or like you
Right.
said something earlier that was key. It was very tiny, like it was like a little blurb that you said, but it was so key how you said, it's just hard to explain like the abuse.
Hmm.
It's hard to
Hmm.
explain like in the beginning because it is
Right.
hard to explain.
Right.
It's very subtle and kind of covert, and
Hmm.
yet, like you said, he could be great around, friends. He has his mask, and then the women calling. It's like you're
Hmm.
justifying. Well, at least he's telling me what he's doing,
Right.
right? I
Right.
always say anytime you say at least, you lower your standards.
Right.
I do want to ask you about that though. Why were the women calling you?
I don't know. I guess that they wanted to know. So that was the point of me wanting to know ahead of time and to hear it from
Mhm.
him, because I felt like, so we got to the point where when women would call me and I was like, "Oh yeah, what's your name? So you're so and so. Hey, yes, I know about you." Type thing. It felt like it gave me some type of power over the
Mhm.
situation, instead of them having the
Mhm.
power in, like, oh, I'm gonna call his wife and tell her what he's doing
Mhm.
behind her back.
I
But then
mean,
when
honestly,
I
he
to
sounds like
say,
a sex trafficker too.
mhm,
He does. Like when you're telling me this because I work with women, that, and I'm
mhm.
like, wow, this is like red flag, and it's law
Oh yeah,
enforcement. Listen, I'm not like anti-police or anything.
right,
However, there's very corrupt, like your ex-husband,
absolutely.
who are trafficking women through. And that's why I was asking, like, are the women calling you like to say, like, hey, I'm a victim? Like,
No, it
I'm not even one of
wasn't.
his. Okay.
No, it was never like a victim. It was more like, yeah, I know what your husband is doing and you don't, and let me tell
Okay.
you, type deal. And
Hmm.
so that's why I found it at that time to be empowering to already know. So when I would get these when I would get these phone calls or somebody would ask me and I'd be like, oh yeah, I know. Yeah, he told me, so instead of them calling and saying, oh, let me tell her this and let me mess her up. She's not going to know about it. She's going to feel awful. It was me being able to flip it back on them and say, oh yeah, we had that conversation. I know, and and at that point during that time, it made me feel like I had control over it and it gave me power instead of leaving me powerless.
It's so true. So if you, looking back, like in hindsight, what do you wish somebody would have told you? Or like,
my gosh, I don't know. I wish that.
Okay, wait. Like if I had known you back then, right, as a friend, and I saw like you going through this, and if I had said to you, Tara, is your husband abusing you? What do you think you would have said?
I probably would have said no.
Yeah, that's what I hear all the time.
Said no. I would, but but that's a good question. I'm glad that you asked because, like I said, there were very few people in my life at that time that knew what was going on. And I wish that one of them, including my sister, but then my sister has her own story, the reason. But I wish that one of those people had just said, you know what, Tara, this is not okay. Like you're not alone and you can get through this. And if you decide to do this, I have your back. Whatever you choose to do, I have your back. And you don't have to continue to live this way. Like,
I love that you said that. Like, I really want people to hear that. Like,
yeah.
That's how you could help somebody.
And for that to come from somebody who I trusted and I know that had my best interest at heart. Like if my best friend at the time had came to me and said, girl, like, this is not okay. Like she later said that, but at that point in my mind, I had already started working my way through the process of, okay, this is not okay. I'm leaving. But if she had said it earlier on and just had that real conversation with me and say, look, I love you and I see that you're hurting and I see what he does. I see how you all's relationship is and whatever it is, I support you and that you can make it through. Like if they had just came to me and had this but instead for so many years, they knew what was going on, but they just okay, ignored it. Like, okay, she's dealing with this, and my sister later told me, she said, well, I just didn't want to be the one to tell you to leave your husband. And I didn't feel like I had the right to tell you that because on the outside looking in her mind, looking at me, I had already made the decision that I wanted to stay. So I never gave that because I've always been kind of strong anyway, even in the midst of when I'm not strong and I'm crumbling down on the inside. Yeah. And so she said, you never gave me like the niche that you needed help or that you wanted help or that you wanted somebody to tell you like, hey girl, get out of this type thing. And so she said, you felt like you were in it and that you had made up your mind. So I didn't want to be the one to tell you otherwise, is what she told me.
That makes sense. But what people don't understand though, is you didn't think you had a choice, right? If people were saying you had a choice, you were saying you didn't want help. You didn't think you had a choice.
Yeah.
And that's really why a lot of, like if you don't have a choice, if people say, well, you have a choice, well, what's the other option?
Right.
Tell me my other option. Yeah.
I did not think I had another choice. Like I said, I was still and I remember just constantly in my head playing back and saying, man, if my mom was still here, I would not be dealing with all of this. Like I would still go back home to my mom. If my mom was here,
But you know what, Tara, I have chills because your mom was there, right?
She was there.
What I love about this also is how God showed up in all those moments. Once you realize, okay, I'm done. Like there's no turning back. I want it more than I want to breathe. And God just like opened up doors for you.
Yeah.
And he was
And
like, okay, this is the way. This is the way.
and to be honest, Lisa, like that's the way my whole life has been. Like even since I've been here in Nashville, it's just like
Mhm.
I make up my mind about something and I pray on it and I manifest and I just say, you know what, whatever I have to do, Lord, just use me, guide me. And it just
Mhm.
and it just happens. Like it's kind of like magic, really.
I have chills right now. It's God, because you're saying,
Mhm.
God, just use me. Just
Yeah,
use me.
it's
And it
yeah.
makes me, honestly, it makes me love you even more as a coach. Like I understand why you are the coach that you are,
Mhm. I
right?
am
Like I was
very
drawn to you,
passionate.
like
Yeah,
your
very passionate about
energy.
everything.
And I just feel like people who have a story like this where they overcame stuff that most people, can't even imagine,
Right.
and it turns you into a different person. Like it
It
turns you
does.
into the woman God created you to be,
Yeah.
right?
And especially when you're able to overcome. So to end the story that I was telling, I was divorced 1 week, which was April. I got divorced April, sometime during the end of April,
Mm-hmm.
and then end up graduating a week later
Mm-hmm.
from undergrad with my degree from college.
Okay,
That's just how
what was your degree in?
my degree was in education,
Of
and I had a
course.
minor. Yeah, I had a minor in child psychology and counseling.
Of course.
So I that's what my degree was in,
Mm-hmm.
and I ended up graduating, and I just remember just crying after my graduation. I couldn't even stop crying because I just kept on thinking about like, you made it. You're here. You're divorced. You finished school. Everything that I said that I wanted to do, I was able to accomplish with God by my side. So yeah.
Oh my God. We just need to end right there. Like seriously, that right there is so beautiful. Like
Yeah.
everything you needed to accomplish, you did with God by your
Yeah.
side.
And then everything that I did then to accomplish that has been the baseline and the building blocks to every other step I've taken since then up until now.
Amazing. What do you want to tell that one woman that's watching that is in a really bad place and doesn't see a way out, doesn't think that she has another option, and she's listening to your story? And maybe even if you were listening to your story, yeah, but she's different because look at her,
Right.
and she's strong, and she had a good mom. I had
Mhm.
a bad mom. We tend
Mhm.
to do that, right? But what do you want to
Right.
tell that one woman that's watching this and just saying, making excuses of why she can't get to where you are right now?
And to be honest, Lisa, I'm the tough love person. I feel like
I noticed. What are you talking about? Oh, every time I'm in your damn class, I feel
tough,
the tough love.
look, tough love. I feel like if a person is still making excuses, then they're not ready. And because
Yes.
if you're still making
Yes.
excuses, then you are not ready. And then maybe there's still some lessons that you need to learn in that situation. Because when when I was not ready, I made excuses for my situation and why I was where I was. But when I had made a decision where I had had enough, there was not a excuse I could think of that was going to hold me back and keep me where I was. And
Oh,
so,
babe, I feel we need a mic drop right about now. I mean, seriously.
because I didn't want to hear it, no matter what.
Uh-huh.
And I'm pretty sure people had said, and I knew, it's like no matter what people said or what I knew or how hard or how hurt I was or how much pain I was or how many nights I cried myself to sleep. It wasn't until I was tired of being sick and tired that was able to make a decision.
All right. Did
And
you hear that? I know you're watching, whoever you are, right? Stop making excuses. And when you're
yeah,
ready, you're
it's
ready.
everything is a mindset. And I know that now. Like,
Mhm.
like even with working out and going to the gym, like you can being a coach, I can tell people like, you need to do this and I can help you and meet me here. And we're going to do this and we're going to do these and we're going to run and we're going to jump in jacks and come to this class. But if a person mentally is not ready, they're not going to show up. They're not going to be able to make the commitment.
No.
And that's the way I feel about life in general, about any situation. It's a mindset.
Mm-hmm. Oh my
And
gosh.
unfortunately, some people don't get that mindset. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but I said once you are in a situation long enough, and it's all in timing, and when you feel like you've learned enough lessons out of that relationship or that situation, then you make a decision. And I mean, I just can't say I was tired. I was tired of being sick and tired, where I was disgusted with myself every day that I was not doing something to make a move in the direction that I know I needed to be. Where I would look in the mirror and I literally would be like, oh, I just cannot today. What are you going to do today to help you get out of this decision instead of just moping because you've done that for years already?
I love it. I can't thank you enough for sharing your story. You're going to help so many women. I can't wait to do the clips too, because the producer will take little clips out of it.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some really good clips. I always end the show as a reminder to people and by telling them you're worth it. So you want to say it with me on the count of 3?
Absolutely.
1, 2, 3.
You're worth it.
Are worth it. Don't
Yes,
forget
you are.
that.
You're worth it. Absolutely.